I never thought a cup of cheap hospital coffee would be the reason I am still alive. My name is Evelyn Parker. I am 64 years old, a widow, and I worked the night shift at a hospital in Salem, Oregon. I am not brave. I am not powerful. I am not anyone important. I was just a woman trying to survive after life quietly took everything familiar away from me. On a Thursday night in December, a rideshare driver refused to take me home. He pulled into an empty parking lot instead, turned off the engine, and looked at me through the rearview mirror with fear in his eyes. He said, "Evelyn, you cannot go home tonight. Your neighbor has been watching you. He knows your schedule. He tried your front door less than an hour ago." In that moment, my entire sense of safety collapsed. The man he was talking about was someone I waved to sometimes, a man who lived 3 houses down, a man who worked at the same hospital I did, a man I had never once thought to fear. If the driver had not been paying attention, I would have walked into my house that night completely unaware. If I had not treated him like a human being instead of just a service, he would have never listened closely enough to realize I was in danger. This is not a story about luck. It is a story about what happens when quiet people notice things others ignore, when small kindnesses create consequences no one could predict, and how, sometimes, survival has nothing to do with strength and everything to do with being seen. My life did not fall apart all at once. It thinned out slowly, quietly, the way light fades at the end of a long day. After my husband died, the insurance barely covered the funeral. 42 years of marriage reduced to paperwork and a final bill I could not afford to argue with. The house felt too quiet after that. One plate instead of two, one cup of coffee in the morning, one voice missing from every room. I had retired years earlier. Teaching was supposed to be the last job I ever held, but grief does not care about plans, and neither does rent, utilities, or grocery prices. So at 63, I went back to work. North Valley Medical Center hired me for the night shift in medical records. 3 nights a week, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. Midnight corridors, fluorescent lights, the kind of work no one notices unless something goes wrong. I told myself the job was temporary, just until I caught my breath, just until things felt stable again. But stability is different when you are older. It means survival, not comfort. I took the bus home after every shift. The last one left just after 11:30. It was not convenient, but it was predictable. Predictability mattered to me. It made the world feel manageable. Then the schedule changed. Budget cuts, reduced routes. The last bus now left before my shift ended. Leaving early meant losing hours I could not afford to lose. I stood at the staff entrance one night, staring at the empty street, realizing something simple and terrifying. For the first time in decades, I had no way home. That is how I ended up opening a rideshare app on my phone, my hands shaking slightly as I confirmed the request. I thought it was just transportation. I did not know it was the moment my life quietly changed direction. The first time the car pulled up, I hesitated. It was just after midnight. The parking lot behind the hospital was poorly lit, and the silver sedan idled near the curb as if it had been waiting longer than necessary. I checked the license plate twice. The rating was perfect, 5 stars, hundreds of rides. I told myself I was being foolish and opened the back door. The driver introduced himself as Michael Turner. He looked to be in his late 50s, with tired eyes and the posture of someone who had spent too many years bracing for disappointment. He asked me how my shift had been, not out of obligation, but like he actually wanted the answer. I said it had been long. He nodded like he understood. On the drive home, we talked about nothing important: the weather, road construction, how quiet the city felt at night. When we reached my street, he wished me a safe evening and drove off without another word. 3 nights later, he picked me up again, then again the week after that. At first, I assumed it was coincidence. Salem is not a big city, and night drivers tend to circle the same areas. But after the 3rd week, I realized something else was happening. Every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, Michael's car appeared within seconds of my request. He already had my address loaded. He never asked where I was going. He was not hovering. He was not intrusive. He simply showed up consistently, like someone who had decided to be reliable in a world that rarely was. By the end of the first month, the ride itself became something I looked forward to. 12 minutes where I did not feel invisible. 12 minutes where someone listened or stayed quiet when silence felt better. I did not know it then, but those ordinary rides were building a quiet trust, the kind that only forms when two people stop performing and simply exist as they are. Trust does not arrive loudly. It settles in through repetition. By the second month, Michael and I had fallen into a rhythm neither of us named. I would finish my shift, step outside into the cold night air, and his car would already be there. I stopped checking the app. I stopped worrying about who might pick me up. One night in early November, the hospital cafeteria was about to close when I passed by. On impulse, I bought 2 coffees instead of one, the kind that comes in thin paper cups and tastes slightly burnt no matter how much cream you add. When I handed one to Michael through the window, he didn't take it right away. "You don't have to do that," he said. "I know," I replied, "but it's late and you've been driving all night." He held the cup like it was something fragile, valuable. He thanked me twice before putting it in the holder. After that, the coffee became part of our routine. Sometimes it was coffee, sometimes hot chocolate when the mornings turned colder. Once, I taped a small candy cane to the lid without thinking much of it. Michael laughed, but his voice caught. "My wife used to do things like this," he said. "Small things. I didn't appreciate them at the time." "You notice them now," I said. "That counts for something." We talked more after that, about his job, about my husband, about the strange loneliness that comes from being surrounded by people who don't really see you. Michael never rushed me, never interrupted. He listened like every word mattered. I thought I was just being polite, kind in a small, forgettable way. I did not realize I was teaching someone to pay attention. The night everything changed did not announce itself. There was no warning, no sudden sense of danger, no voice in my head telling me to be afraid. I finished my shift the same way I always did, logging it out of the system, slipping on my coat, and walking toward the staff exit with my shoulders slightly hunched from fatigue. Michael's car was waiting as expected, but the moment I sat down, I felt it. Something was off. Michael did not greet me right away. His hands were tight around the steering wheel, knuckles pale, his eyes fixed on the road ahead instead of the mirror. The car stayed parked longer than usual. Finally, he spoke. "Evelyn, I need you to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly." My stomach tightened. "What is it?" I asked. "Do you know the man who lives a few houses down from you? Gray house, red pickup truck?" The question made no sense. I blinked, trying to place it. "I know who you mean," I said, slowly. "We wave sometimes, that's all." "Why?" Michael did not answer. He pulled away from the hospital, but instead of turning toward my street, he went the opposite direction. "Michael," I said, my voice sharper now, "you missed the turn." "I did not miss it," he replied. "We need somewhere quiet to talk." The city slipped past in silence. My heart began to race, not because of what he said, but because of how carefully he was choosing his words. When he pulled into the empty parking lot of a closed grocery store and turned off the engine, I knew my night was no longer ordinary. "Evelyn," he said, turning to face me fully, "you need to listen to me very carefully." Fear, real fear, settled into my chest for the first time. Michael did not rush his words. That frightened me more than anything else. He took a slow breath, then said my name again, like he needed to anchor me before the truth landed. "I have picked up that man before," he said, "more than once. His name is Gregory Hale." The name meant nothing to me at first. It was just a label disconnected from the familiar image of a neighbor mowing his lawn or sitting in his truck. Michael continued. "He rides late at night. He drinks too much, and when he drinks, he talks." I stayed silent, my hands folded tightly in my lap. "The first time I drove him," Michael said, "I didn't think much of it. People complain, people rant. It's part of the job. But then he mentioned your address, not just the street, the exact number." My chest tightened. Michael reached for his phone, his movements careful, almost rehearsed. After that ride, I started paying attention, writing things down, dates, times, repeated phrases, patterns that could no longer be dismissed. I told myself I was just being cautious. He scrolled through his notes and turned the screen toward me. Lines of text filled the display. Short entries, precise, clinical. Last Saturday night, Michael said, his voice lower now. He was angry. He was on the phone the whole ride. He said, "She works nights. The house is empty. She knows too much. We need to deal with it before she goes to the police." The world tilted. I felt lightheaded, like the ground beneath me had shifted without warning. I asked Michael to stop talking. I needed a moment to breathe. He waited, hands still, eyes on me, giving me space even now. Then he said the sentence that shattered everything I thought I understood. "Tonight, before I picked you up, I drove past your street." I swallowed hard. "His truck was parked in front of your house, lights off, engine running. I watched him get out. I watched him walk up to your front door." My vision blurred. "He tried the handle," Michael said. He stood there for almost a full minute. Then he went back to his truck and sat there watching. That is when I knew I could not stay quiet anymore. I could no longer pretend this was coincidence or paranoia or drunk nonsense. Michael looked at me, his eyes steady but full of urgency. "Evelyn, you cannot go home tonight." And for the first time, I understood that the danger was not theoretical. It was already at my door. I wanted to tell him he was wrong. I wanted to believe there was some simple explanation, some misunderstanding that would dissolve if I thought about it long enough. But my body betrayed me. My hands would not stop shaking. My mouth felt dry. Fear does not ask permission before it settles in. I asked the only question my mind could form: why me? Michael did not answer right away. He stared through the windshield at the darkened storefronts, choosing his words with care. "I do not think it is personal," he said finally. "I think you are in the wrong place at the wrong time." That did not make it better. He explained that Gregory worked nights too, that he had mentioned the hospital more than once, that he talked about access, about knowing which offices were empty late at night. At the time, Michael had not understood what it meant, only that the details were too specific to ignore. Then pieces of my own memory began to surface. The janitor I passed near the records room some nights, the man who kept his cap pulled low, the way I sometimes felt watched in the hallway without ever seeing anyone there. Gregory Hale. The name finally attached itself to a face. I thought about the audit my department had started weeks earlier. Missing files, small discrepancies that did not make sense. We had been told not to worry. Probably clerical errors, probably nothing. Probably nothing is the most dangerous phrase in the world. Michael turned toward me again. "Evelyn, I need you to hear this. I do not know exactly what he is planning, but I know he has been watching you. I know he knows your schedule, and I know he tried to get into your house tonight." He paused. "That means whatever he is afraid of, whatever he thinks you know, it is serious enough for him to take risks." The parking lot felt suddenly too open, too exposed. I imagined my house sitting dark and empty, just like Gregory expected it to be. I realized then how carefully my life had been mapped without my knowledge, my routines, my habits, my predictability. Michael reached back and handed me his phone. "These are my notes," he said. "Everything I have. You need to show them to the police." I looked at the screen again, at the quiet proof of someone paying attention when it mattered, and I understood something terrifying. If Michael had not chosen to notice, I would have never known I was already being hunted. We did not debate what to do next. Fear has a way of stripping away hesitation. When your safety is no longer abstract, choices become simple, even if they are not easy. Michael did not ask if I wanted to report it. He told me, "We're going now." And for once in my life, I did not argue. We sat in a quiet interview room at the Salem Police Department just after midnight. Fluorescent lights, a metal table, two officers who looked like they had already seen too much of the world. I told my story in pieces, my voice steady only because shock had taken over where panic wanted to live. Michael laid out his notes, dates, times, repeated phrases, patterns that could no longer be dismissed as coincidence. One of the officers asked if Michael had recordings. "Yes," he said. Audio only for my own protection. Passengers agree when they request the ride. The room shifted when the recordings began to play. Gregory's voice was sloppy but clear enough, talking about my house, my schedule, saying I knew too much, saying I needed to be handled. When the last recording ended, the older officer leaned back in his chair and looked at me differently. "Mrs. Parker," he said, "do you know what Gregory Hale does for a living?" I shook my head. "He works at North Valley Medical Center, night shift facilities and maintenance." My stomach dropped. "He has access to records areas," the officer continued, "storage rooms, offices after hours." Something clicked, then sharp and immediate. "The missing files," I said. Both officers leaned forward. I explained about the audit, the elderly patient records that had vanished, the unexplained billing discrepancies, how none of it seemed connected until now. The younger officer exhaled slowly. "If he thought you were part of uncovering something," he said, "and he believed you might have taken notes or documents home, that would explain why he tried to get into your house." The room went quiet. The officer stood abruptly. "We need a warrant now. And Mrs. Parker," he added, "you are not going home tonight." In that moment, I understood the full shape of what I had nearly walked into. This was not just about fear, it was about evidence, and how close I had come to being silenced because of it. I spent that night in a hotel room under police protection, staring at the ceiling while the city slept around me. I kept thinking about how close I had come to walking into my house like any other night, how easily routine could have ended me. Safety, I learned, is often just a story we tell ourselves until something proves otherwise. The next morning, the detective called. They had searched Gregory Hale's garage just before dawn. Inside, they found boxes of patient files stacked neatly along the walls, hundreds of them, records spanning years, evidence of systematic healthcare fraud tied to false insurance claims, enough to ruin lives, enough to send someone to prison for a very long time. Gregory had been arrested without incident. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt hollow. Knowing you were almost hurt does something strange to the mind. It leaves questions that do not have clean answers. What if Michael had ignored the warning signs? What if I had been less kind? What if timing had shifted by minutes? Later that day, Michael picked me up from the hotel. Not through the app, he just showed up. On the drive home, I finally asked him the question that had been sitting heavy in my chest. "How did you know to take it seriously?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Because I did not once," he said. He told me about his daughter, about a man she trusted, about warning signs he dismissed as overthinking, about the night she was hurt because no one paid attention soon enough. "I failed her," he said simply. "I promised myself I would never fail again." That was when I understood the truth. Michael did not save me because he was brave. He saved me because he had learned painfully what happens when people stop listening. The investigation moved faster than I expected. Within days, the hospital confirmed what the police had uncovered. Gregory Hale had been stealing patient records for over 2 years, targeting elderly and low-income patients who were unlikely to question their statements. He submitted false claims, redirected payments, and covered his tracks by removing physical files during night shifts. When confronted with the evidence, he did not deny it. At trial, I testified about the audit, about the missing records, about the night he tried my door. Michael testified too, his notes and recordings forming a timeline that could not be argued away. Gregory was sentenced to federal prison. People congratulated me afterwards, told me how lucky I was, how brave. I nodded politely, but luck was not what stayed with me. What stayed was the knowledge that danger does not always look dangerous. Sometimes it looks like a neighbor you wave to. Sometimes it wears a uniform and works in the same building you do. Sometimes it watches quietly and waits. I returned to my house on Maple Ridge Lane with new locks and a police report folded carefully in my purse. The walls felt thinner, the nights felt longer, but I was alive. And every time fear threatened to pull me under, I reminded myself of one simple truth. I had not survived because I was strong. I survived because someone chose to pay attention when it would have been easier not to. Life did not return to normal after that. It reshaped itself. Michael kept driving me to work, but I sat in the front seat now. The barrier between driver and passenger was gone. We talked less about work and more about the things that mattered. Regret, forgiveness, the quiet hope that life might still hold something good after disappointment. A few months later, Michael received a call he never expected. His daughter had read about the trial, about his testimony, about how he protected a stranger when he once failed to protect her. She told him she was tired of carrying anger that no longer served her. She wanted him to meet his granddaughter. When he told me, his voice shook, not with fear this time, but with something softer, hope. We celebrated with takeout eaten out of paper containers, laughing at how life had brought us together in such an unlikely way. I realized then that kindness doesn't always fix things immediately. Sometimes it plants seeds that take time to grow. Sometimes it repairs damage we never get to see directly. My own life changed too. The house no longer felt like a place I hid from the world. It became a place people visited. On Sundays, Michael's daughter and her little girl came over for dinner. They started calling me Aunt Evelyn. Family, I learned, is not always built by blood. Sometimes it's built by shared survival, and sometimes it begins with something as small as noticing another person and deciding they matter. I'm 65 now. I still work 3 nights a week at North Valley Medical Center. I still lock my doors twice before bed. Some habits don't fade, but I am no longer afraid in the way I once was. Fear isolates. Understanding connects. Last month, a new clerk joined our department. Young, overwhelmed, sitting alone in the break room, staring at a screen like it might swallow her whole. I recognized that look immediately. I brought her a cup of coffee and sat down beside her without saying much. She thanked me like I had done something extraordinary. I smiled because I knew better. Extraordinary things are rarely loud. They are built from small choices made consistently, from listening instead of dismissing, from noticing instead of ignoring, from deciding that the person in front of you is not invisible. People often think revenge is about destruction, about taking something back, about making someone else feel pain. But the most powerful revenge I know is survival with integrity. Gregory Hale wanted silence. He wanted fear. He wanted control. Instead, he was exposed, not because of rage or confrontation, but because 2 ordinary people paid attention to details others overlooked. Michael and I did not win by being louder. We won by being human. If this story reached you tonight, I hope you take one thing with you. Be kind, not because it guarantees safety, not because it earns rewards, but because kindness sharpens awareness. It teaches people to listen. And one day, that awareness might save a life, maybe even your own. If this story resonated with you, share it. Leave a comment about where you are listening from. And remember, quiet choices often carry the greatest